Well, hello, everybody. Greetings and salutations from South Africa. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the beautiful world you are. I hope you're all wonderful and well. We are still surviving here. As you can see, I'm still here. Always asking you to please keep my country in your prayers right now. We are going through huge crisis, huge change, lots of trauma on the streets. But in fact, I've actually done a show which we're going to be airing tomorrow and drop in with Shanti. It's called The Monster Changes Its Face. And I've kind of given a rundown on South African politics and what I believe is currently happening in this country. And if it's happening here, it's happening in other places as well, of course, because we all follow the same template. Interesting times indeed, and I hope you are safe and well wherever in the world you are. And without any further ado, ta-da, Dr. Dennis, how nice to see you again. Welcome back. How are you doing?
All right. Salutations to you and everyone else out there. Yeah, I was just listening to what you were saying there, and definitely, I think, people don't realize that the powers that be follow sort of a template. That's what I've said a lot. I've said this before, Shanti, and it kind of throws people off when I say this. But there is one good thing about evil. And somebody said, what are you talking about, Dennis? What do you mean there's something good about evil? There is one good thing about it. It is predictable. If you know how it works, you can predict what it's going to do next most of the time.
Exactly.
And that's good in our favor. We can kind of figure out what's going to happen next. But you're very right about that in places like with South Africa and now in where I live and other places like that. It seems like they're following the manual on this or something along those
Everywhere.
lines.
It's the same manual everywhere, Dennis. It's the
Yeah.
two wings of the same bird. And that's how politics works. They're always going to give you that opposition party and that one, and then that one's going to come in and they play us like that. But it's what I was saying, and the show is going to be aired tomorrow. But really at the end of the time, while this flapjacking is going on here between these wings, the bird flies exactly where it wants to be and wants to go, while
Oh,
we
yeah.
are distracted by the wings. And that's the shadow government, actually. That's the
Well,
elite.
they
That's the control. That's the
they
machine of control.
that's what it's all about. They do this distraction on us to keep us distracted from seeing the real things that's going on in the background. Sort of like what magicians and illusionists do.
Of
Watch this
course.
hand while I'm doing something with the other hand, kind of a thing. And they're doing that, and they use things like fear, racism, things like that as weapons to divide us and keep us. Because it's like you say, the one word it all comes down to is control. That's what it's
Yeah,
all about. Yeah. Power and
absolutely.
control. Yeah.
And we're seeing
But
it playing itself out here in full force at the moment. But as I said, I mean, if we're looking all over the world, right,
mhm.
there's the people are tired, they're revolting. I mean, not revolting, they're revolutionizing. What's the word revolting? I didn't mean it like that, but I meant to say is like they
Mhm.
up in arms, revolting at the moment, yes, in so
Yeah.
many different parts of the world, which is a wonderful thing
Mhm.
because it's showing us that we as humans are sick and tired of being suppressed by the oppressors, and we're waking up. We're aware that a lot has been going on behind the scenes. So yeah, I live in the cradle of humankind. It is largely
Well,
believed humanity started here.
you kind of
So, of
get
course,
to
we're going to be getting a lot of
you kind of
chaos
get
and
to
mayhem.
you get to a tipping point. You say, I've had enough. That's it. It's getting to the point where gets old, as we used to say, very quickly. And a lot of people are getting that way. They're getting fed up with this stuff, and I don't blame them. I mean, look, how they're playing this little chess game with us, and they think that they hold all the cards, and we don't, you know. But speaking of evil, I got a little supernatural tip for you here. 9.5 tenths of vinegar, white vinegar, and one little small part of sea salt. Mix it together, and you got a spray to keep evil spirits away. Okay, this is an old remedy. I
they're
was
like
talking.
vinegar.
Yeah, it's an old folklore thing that they used to say that this will actually, it's sort of like the poor man's holy water kind of thing. And so I thought I would mention that to all our viewers today. But they say that if you're having like bad dreams or your restless nights or something like that, that you can kind of spray this around your bed, like, and it will chase these bad dreams and bad intentional type feelings away from you. It will probably scare your boyfriend or girlfriend away too. But I was going to mention that to everyone, though. That's an old time thing. It goes way back. As a matter of fact, it's even biblical that, if you might remember, they gave Christ on the cross vinegar. So it's
Yeah.
been used a lot since then, back in the days. But that's one of the formulas. I thought I would mention that to everyone, that if you got some white vinegar with sea salt, you're okay, you know.
I've heard that salt is very good.
Mm-hmm.
Just
sea salt.
sprinkle it around as well.
This is supposedly a cleansing kind of a formula for cleansing, spiritual cleansing kind of thing. But it also will kill bugs pretty good too. It gets rid of bugs in your house, so that's a good thing as well. So that's a good little sideline for it. But anyway, we have an interesting subject ahead of us today. We're going to unpack it, and by I mean unpacking, I call it like an onion of mystery here. The more layers you peel off of it, the more interesting it gets. And today we're going to be talking about the women of the Vril. Now, we've talked about them in the past. We talked about the Vril Society, and this kind of ties into that other show we did on the legend of the white gods. And all of this is in a strange way very, very connected. And that's what we're going to look at today. And of course, since we're talking evil, one of the most evil regimes that ever walked the land of this world was the Nazis. We know that. We know how the Nazis operated and all that. And of course, the head of the Nazis was Hitler. A lot of people do not realize that Hitler, and I've studied this guy intensely, he is a very interesting guy from where he comes from, in a bad sort of way, though. He's not a good guy. But he's kind of interesting to kind of psychoanalyze him a little bit, And I like the psychology of stuff when you look at this. And I've often said, Shanty, that if you want to understand something, whatever it may be, a good tip on that is you start at the beginning of it, the origin of it, what makes it that way, whatever it is you're dealing with. And looking at his origin and understanding what, where he comes from, it is a fascinating idea that he was absolutely consumed with the supernatural and occultic type stuff in this world. People don't realize this about Hitler. And of course, his right-hand man, Himmler, was just the same way. They were like two peas in a pod, okay? And they were the original bosom buddies, actually. So one did, the other did, and they were both consumed with understanding. But what drew them to understanding the occult and the forbidden knowledge and stuff like that, it was not because they wanted to learn. It wasn't all about knowledge or being scholars in it. They wanted power. That's what it was all about. Like we just mentioned a few minutes ago, power, the thirst for power drives this world, especially politics and people who are in power. It is, and I've said this before, and I stand behind this statement, the most addictive thing on this world, on this planet, is power. It addicts you completely. And complete power completely corrupts you to a certain degree. And they were all about corruption and power, definitely, especially Hitler. And there's an interesting thing. I've watched a lot of his speeches over the years. Some of them, of course, I don't speak German, but I had to get it translated. And it's not what he's saying. One day it came to me, it's not what he's saying, per se. I mean, he's saying the regular things a lot of politicians would say and all that, the empty promises and the ego, fanning the ego a little bit and all this stuff. They know how to work the crowd, okay? They know how to do that stuff. And it wasn't just the words, though. I'm sitting there thinking, what's this guy got going for him? He's not that charismatic. He's not that, he's not even appearing to be that very bright, very smart. And I have to wonder, and here's an interesting tie into this, and a lot of other people have wondered about this. Did he have something else going for him? Other than just, being able to talk and say things he wanted to. Did he have some type of a power, almost like a hypnotic, supernatural type of power that he could hold people and get and sway people to get them to do the things he wanted? Yeah.
He had brilliant oration skills, that's for sure. So he knew how to use his voice. He knew how to project. And it's true what you're saying. He didn't have necessarily, wasn't saying anything that was magnificently different to any other politician, but he had the oration skills. And I think that's possibly what he could have been channeling, right? Some entity when he was up there speaking and drawing the crowds in that were almost like in a hypnotic state. Because if you, as you say, if you watch any of his old speeches or anything, those people were mesmerized with Hitler.
And I'm sitting there thinking, God, what's this man got he's got going for him that he's got all these people believing what he's saying here. And he's marshaling armies and arming people and making treaties, which he laughed about. I think they actually signed one treaty I talked about when we were talking about the Vampires of Schwarzwald, that show we did on the Vampires of the Black Forest. He signed a treaty that day with Poland, and he walked out with Hitler, and he was laughing. That's not worth the paper it's written on. He didn't intend to follow that. So he was all about deception in that. And here's where the Vril comes in on this, Shanti. And here's the interesting part about it. The ladies of the Vril were a secret society. Okay. And, we've talked about the Vril before, and a lot of people are not familiar with that. I advise you to go find the book, The Vril, The Coming Race. I gave you a copy. I sent you a copy of it, the digital copy of it. And it is a fascinating thing, but it is among the very first, what you would call science fiction novels, and was written back in the 1880s. And guess who showed up in the 1880s? Let's start with this lady. Her name was Helena Blavatsky. And she was actually the originator of what we call modern spiritualism, or the forbidden knowledge and the occult and all this stuff. She is probably the one that kind of laid the foundations for Aleister Crowley and all this to begin with. And she had a philosophy called theosophy. Theosophy means that all religions have a basis in one truth. And that truth is that forbidden knowledge, that hidden knowledge. And she was, of course, as occultists do, she was the one that possessed that knowledge, supposedly. But anyway, this is where spiritualism began. And I'm not going to get into her story today because that's another show at another time. But that's where it began. And she had her place in London. So this began in London, went to America in many aspects. And then, of course, you had people like Aleister Crowley in London. It went back to London, and then from London, again, it went into Germany and Bavaria and Eastern Europe to a certain extent. And by the way, Helena Blavatsky was Ukrainian, or Russian at that time. Ukraine was actually owned by Russia at that time, but she was Ukrainian. And but she migrated to England. And that's where she got a lot of her start at with that. But people like Aleister Crowley took notice of her. She was not, I'm not going to say he was a disciple of her, but he was definitely influenced by a lot of things that she did. And we know where that went, with people like, Whitley Strieber and some other people like that have got into the Aleister Crowley thing, along with Jack Parsons. We've talked about him, who is deep in NASA. NASA still has a Jack Parsons Day, by the way, folks. It's Halloween appropriately. That's Jack Parsons Day at NASA. So all of this is tied in. You see the connections going on here, and
Yeah.
it's like almost like the honeycomb of a beehive kind of a thing going on here. You know, everything is connected. All the chambers go together, and that's the way this is. And here's where the Vril begins, because Helena Blavatsky knew about this book, the Vril, the coming race. Now, let me lay that out right quick for some people that may not be familiar with what the Vril is. The Vril was supposed to be a secret underworld society, a civilization that lives beneath us, and they actually had another world down there. And that world had a sun, just like we have a sun that shines. And by the way, it was called the Black Sun because it was sort of like it gave light, but it gave a kind of a peculiar kind of light. And this is a symbolism, by the way, of false teachings and false lights, because the light of God's sun lights our world. You know, and God, of course, at the beginning of all creation, before he created anything, he said, "Let there be light." That symbolizes the light of goodness and love and all this stuff. But the people of the Vril were existing under a black sun, which that symbolizes something not too good. Okay, some bad stuff. That symbolizes sort of a false light or a false philosophy kind of a thing going on. So these people were not supposed to be good people. Although when you first meet the Vril as a society, they seem like good people. Oh, you know, we love you. Come on in. We'll assimilate with you. We do what we want for you. Now, the Vril also had something else going. They had a power. They had a power base, and this is going to start sounding familiar to you folks, okay? They had a power base called the Vril. That's what they named themselves after this power, the Vril. That's Vril. That's how that's spelled, okay? And it's pronounced Vril, like real, but Vril with a V. This power source was actually psychic to a certain extent. What it would do, they would hook up to this strange power source under this black sun. They hooked up to it psychically, and it gave them supposedly powers, almost godlike powers. They could do things with this. But their society was based on the fact we have this great power. We got to control it. It's kind of like the Spider-Man thing, you know. Great power goes with great responsibility. Okay, that's the way that goes. And they felt they had a responsibility. But the guy that found himself living among the Vril found out that all of this was sort of a false face thing going on here, because the Vril really wanted to come back to the surface and reclaim this world once again, because they were driven under this world by cataclysmic things. And one of their last outposts, by the way, you might be familiar with it, was called Atlantis. These were the people of Atlantis. And when Atlantis fell and their civilization fell, and they were supposed to be an outpost of aliens that came here to this world, when their civilization fell, they went underground to preserve themselves, and that's why they are living underground. But they took the Vril power with them, and and this is the power that powered Atlantis. Now, you might remember the fable, the story about Atlantis is in the very center of the city, and it was surrounded by canals. Like it was like an island kingdom. It was surrounded by canals. Plato talks about this, and in the very center was a temple. And this was the temple of the Vril. And it was like a gigantic antenna type thing. And this is where they hooked in psychically to this power. And this is what drove Atlantis. Okay. But they became like gods because of this and started trying to rule the whole world. And that's why they failed. Pride got them in the end. That's the old story about pride, you know. And that's why they fell, and they had to go underground to preserve themselves and save their civilization. And they are plotting once again to come back up and take over again. But there's one problem. We're here. We stand in their way. And so the guy finds all of this out. You know, you got to read the story. It's fascinating. I'm just highlighting some of it for you. But it's a very good, well thought out, you know, I mean, it's kind of written back to the Victorian age thing, but it is pretty good. Very much got like, you know, H.G. Wells vibes to it. Okay. So anyway, the coming race, that's why it's called that, the coming race. They're coming back again to take what's theirs. and they don't care how they do that. And that definitely means eliminating us, because we are not supposed to be consciously open to handle the Vril. The real. And what is the Vril? The Vril is supposed to be a cosmic force of power in between the stars, in between space, in between the atoms, the very atoms that make up reality. This is the Vril. This is the power. And if you can tap into it, then you are, well, let's put it point blankly, a god. If you can tap into this power, what does it sound like, by the way, folks? Is this beginning to sound a little familiar? Like maybe a Star Wars kind of thing here, like the Force, okay? And here's the thing about the Vril. It's good or bad. You can use it either way. It's just a tool, okay? It doesn't have a consciousness saying, oh, I'm going to make you do this or I'm going to make you do that. It is a tool in your hands. And the Vril are going to use it for bad things. And that's why they don't want us to have the power, because we will use it against them. Okay, that's just like, I got a bigger gun than you got, and I'm not going to let you borrow my gun, kind of an idea. And that's where the real thing comes in at. But this is definitely where Steven Spielberg got the idea for the Force and Star Wars and all that. But the reason I'm laying all this out for you is this is what the ladies of the Vril Society, the secret society in Germany, hooked into this big time. Okay, they believed all of this stuff, without a doubt. So they began to have seances trying to contact the Vril force itself and channel it. Okay, and that's what mediums do. Supposedly they channel, not only spirits, but they channel whatever's out there. They're open channels to it. In other words, that's really what that means, is they're opening their consciousness to accept these things. But whenever you do that, you're playing a dangerous game, because you do not really know what you're contacting sometimes. And the ladies of the Vril kind of skipped that lesson. They must have been out of town and when they gave that lesson out, because they kind of skipped over that. They didn't care about who they were contacting. And the leader of the Vril was a very beautiful woman. Her name was Maria Oršić. And she was described as beautiful as a model. She was, exceptionally beautiful. And she supposedly, here's the weird thing about it, she supposedly had long, beautiful blonde hair. But they said as she got deeper into the Vril thing and took over the society and began to do all these seances and do this channeling and all this, her hair began to change color. And by the end of World War II, they said she had black hair. Now, whether this is a normal thing or what, I got to contend with that, because that's kind of strange. But that kind of is a symbolism of showing you what may have been happening to her spiritually on the inside. Because, of course, whatever you take in spiritually inside eventually shows up on the outside. And that's what that's supposed to mean. That's the symbolism of that. When she began this, she had good intentions, but eventually it began to change her for the bad and not the good. And that's when it happened. But here's the interesting thing. I mentioned this the other day when we were talking about this, Shanty. They believed that their hair, they never cut their hair. They left their hair long. Their hair reached, to her heels almost. And they had long, beautiful hair. As the Bible says, a woman's crowning glory is her hair. But it wasn't because they were into the looks. They believed that the hair was an antenna that helped them channel these spirits, the spiritual force that they were trying to connect with. They believed that. And that's why they all kept their hair long and all that. And that may be why tied into her hair color changing. I wonder if they all supposedly did it and it wasn't just her or whatever that situation was. But when Hitler and his guys found out about this stuff, and he being obsessed deeply with the occult and going around the world looking for everything, and like we see, with Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark, that's really true. They were out looking and scouring the world for every kind of occult object and power object they could find, like the Spear of Destiny, the Ark, of course, and the Holy Grail. All these different things, they were looking for them desperately. because it wasn't just because they wanted to venerate that or something, but they wanted power. That's what it was all about. And when he heard about these women supposedly channeling power from, these sources out there somewhere, that definitely was icing on Hitler's cake. He said, "I've got to, we got to find out about this. We can use this." Okay. And that's what he was thinking about. And, as all governments do to this very day, they always about weaponization, Shanty. If they can weaponize it, that makes it a whole lot better for them. They love that. Whatever it may be, whether it's weaponizing dolphins or houseflies or whatever the situation is, they're going to go that route with it. And of course, we who are interested in a lot of cryptids and stuff know without a doubt they're probably using them as well in their little power schemes that they have going on. But when Hitler found out about this was cut and dry for him. This is something he really he could get, he could wrap his little fingers around. And the interesting thing about all this is that, of course, Himmler was right up there with him. He wanted to get into this and all that. So the Nazis got deeply involved with the ladies of the Vril. So it was no longer just a woman only thing. Okay. Men became involved, and they were actually engineers of the V2 rockets and stuff, sitting in on these seances and taking notes. Okay. This is how serious they were about this. This wasn't just a fancy thing that they had going on. They were very deadly serious about this. And here's what Maria Oršić would do. She would do automatic writing. Okay, that was one of her main powers. She's not only a clairvoyant, she did automatic writing. And she would go into these trances during these seances and began to write stuff. She would write pages of stuff. And here's the weird thing about it. Some of this was written in Templar code. Here we go with the Templars, because the Knights Templar, who Hitler venerated to a certain degree. We'll get back to him in a minute, because you got to understand where he's coming from in all this. But she was writing in Templar code, okay? And she was also writing in ancient Sumerian. Can you believe that? So this woman, unless she was an incredibly great scholar and learned all this stuff, where is this coming from? You got to ask. Definitely. And so they're channeling all these things, and she begins to connect with an alien source that claims it is from the constellation Taurus. Taurus, the bull. There's the bull again, okay? Like the Moloch and all the rest of that stuff that the ancient Hebrews venerated, and some of the Philistines did too. So you're getting biblical with that. But I'm not going to go that far. But Aldebaran is supposedly a planet in the constellation of Taurus, and she was picking up signals from Aldebaran. And they said, well, heck, we like you guys, so we're going to download some plans, some blueprints to you to make your own flying saucer. Well, boy, the Nazis really got a hold of this. They said, oh, God, this is what we're looking for. The heck with V2 rockets. If we have our own flying saucer fleet, we can take over the world tomorrow. Nobody can stand against us. So they told Maria, definitely get those blueprints. Okay, we want this stuff. So she supposedly channeled the blueprints to make flying saucers and the power to drive them, which was sort of an anti-magnetic, drive that they had, sort of like something from Star Trek kind of a thing here. Okay, before there ever was a Star Trek, by the way, folks. This stuff popped up on that, an anti-magnetic drive, which was anti-gravitational. In other words, what it was doing is using gravity and pushing against it to actually motivate itself. That's the rudimentary explanation for it. So here you go. You got these women channeling these things, and the Nazis are eating this up. Hitler loves this stuff. And we do know that Hitler was involved, thanks to another guy. I think his name was Heinrich. Heinrich was big into the occult, and he was actually, kid you not, was doing rituals with Hitler. They were doing occultic rituals. We have actually found some of the castles that they used, some of the country houses out in Bavaria and all that after the war that had paraphernalia set up for deep occultic rituals and stuff. They were worshiping Satan. They were worshiping the old gods. And Hitler, here's what Hitler had in mind. A lot of people will ask you this over there. Why did Hitler want to erase the Jews? He had a reason for that. It wasn't just because he looked at Jews one day and said, well, I'm going to hate those people, or I'm going to get rid of them. He had a master plan. And the master plan had to do with the Aryan race. Okay? And he believed that the Aryan race, with the blonde-eyed, blue-eyed people, were meant to conquer and run this world. And he believed in the master race, the Aryan race. And the Jews were tied into biblical prophetic saying. Okay, now here's what the prophecy of the Jews, I'm going to just skim over this right quick. The Bible says that you will be scattered across the world, and one day it will bring you all back together again. We saw that prophecy actually fulfilled back after the war, after World War II. They all began to go home and form Israel once again. Up until then, they were scattered everywhere. Hitler knew about this prophecy. And Hitler said, I'm not going to let them do that. We are going to take their place. The Aryan race is going to take the place of the Jews, because we are meant to rule the world. Okay? And that's what he was doing. He was removing the Jews. That's why he was using Auschwitz and Dachau and all these other places to get rid of this whole race of people. He was trying to replace them. And we see this very same thing, ladies and gentlemen, going on in the world today, right now, around us. There are governments in this world trying to replace certain people with other people. It's happening. You can see this in Europe. They try to do it in the United States. They try to do it all in every section where they've done it in South Africa. There are certain people saying we can replace these people with other people. And when they say they replace them, that doesn't mean they're going to send them somewhere else and put them on a nice little farm somewhere. That means they're going to get rid of them. Okay, this is called euthanasia, by the way. And that's what a lot of these plans are. So this stuff, this evil is still in the world, only growing even more powerful now than it was even back in the days of World War II. So the evil is still here. That demon is still walking this world. Okay. And they are trying to do that. And this is the political motivation behind a whole lot of this stuff that's going on. If you really want to strip away the skins of this onion and find out what's really at the heart of it, that's a lot of what's going on here. And it began many years, centuries before that, but Hitler was utilizing it. And this is what his master plan was. And that's why he even had women that he was breeding a master race with. He was having his soldiers, he would pick out soldiers out of his units that had blonde hair and blue eyed, and he would get them to impregnate these women. He was having children with this. He was fixing a race to replace these other ones. The Aryan race. That's what it was all about.
You know what I find interesting there? I recently did on the Drop-In channel, we did some documentaries on the Warburgs and the Wallenbergs of Sweden. Mm-hmm. And if we start digging into them, then you start seeing who's behind the Rothschilds, actually. And you know what's interesting is that, in this documentary, and I want to just give this channel a shout out as well. Again, it's called the Free People of Sweden's Movement, or the Free People's Movement of Sweden. And they actually just did a whole lot of Ericsson, the Lord of the Rings. They bring in that, the 10 rings being the banking system, that literally they're, talking about Sweden and the big clock, Mordor, and they've done a whole lot of correlations to that. So what I'm saying is that, and I believe that Hitler was used as the fall guy. Hitler, like everything, these guys, they work, they put their faces, right? They've got their puppets.
They use politics. They use politicians. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So Hitler would have been, Hitler, I do believe, was a Rothschild. He was, from what I can gather, he was the maid of one of the Rothschilds, something like that. His mom.
The Illuminati. The Illuminati.
So he's definitely been used. And also, I think when we look at what's happening, the truth, that when we start digging behind the Second World War and who really did what to who and who was conniving with who behind the scenes, you know, Hitler, I think, was a puppet. So my question is, who's Hitler's handler? You know, because if we can realize who's Hitler's handler, then we can see who's really,
well, see,
and I mean,
they use politics as a puppet master. That's what they are.
yeah.
They are the puppet master. They're holding the strings, and they use the politicians. They use wars. They use countries to push their little chess pieces around for what they want. And we have over here in this country, like the Rockefellers, the Chases, and all this. These were the old bloodlines that are there. Okay, and we're gonna have to do a show on them one day because it's fascinating stuff. When you get deep into this, and it's very downright demonic. Okay, definitely. It's got a lot of dark, evil with a capital E attached to it. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. They were probably using people like Hitler. Look at what the Pope said about Hitler, by the way. The Pope at that time, you know what he said? Oh, he's a nice Christian gentleman. That's what he said Hitler was. Okay. So they were using these politicians and all that for what they want to do because they're the ones that's manipulating everything in the background. The real true Illuminati, the cabal, or whatever name you want to give them. That's what they're doing. And without doubt, anybody that looks at history with a real true eye, you can see this. I mean, it's very obvious in many aspects of what's really going on. And these, of course, to biblical prophecy, these are the people that will give power to the Antichrist because he's what? They're his handler. They're going to be the ones that, are driving him. They give him the power. They've got the power to give it. You can't give the power unless you got it. Hitler knew that well, too. But now let me tell you this. This is getting freaky here, okay? Here's what. The reason I laid this out about the master race. Here's what the Alderans channeled to Maria Oršić and said, we are the Aryan race. We are tall, we are white, we are blonde haired, and we are blue eyed. Who does this sound like? You have heard many times about the race of the tall whites that people say they see, these aliens that people. Yeah, this is tying into that. And remember the show we did about the legend of the white gods? That ties into that as well. Okay.
But then that's why I say, look at the Swedish, look at the Warburgs and the Wallenbergs and the 10 rings, because from what we're hearing there, they are behind. Because again, we got to think they're keeping their puppets in plain sight. Rothschilds have always been in plain sight. Who's behind the Rothschilds, right? And then we look at like that. It's super interesting. I would highly sort of advise you guys to watch that, because it really just brings in a different layer of who's behind what. Because as you said, the Norse are the tall whites, etc., and the true Aryan races. So they would have combined and connected with Hitler and given him all sorts of ideas. But I mean, I don't even think they had to try very hard, because at the end of the day, they're all in this together. That's the way I see it.
And like I said, like we said earlier, they use race. They use race, the racial thing, the question. Racism will never die in this world because it's useful to certain people. Okay, you got to look at it that way. Yeah, they're not, and that's just one thing. There's fear. You can use fear to motivate people and get them to do what you want, and you can also use social economics to motivate people the way you want. Look at the system that's taking place in China today. You get social points. If you do certain things, you attend so many meetings, and if you don't show up at the meeting next week, Shanty, we're going to lock down your bank account. They're going to take your currency, so that you're not going to have the power to carry your money around. You're going to have to go to them and ask for your money. That's what they want, okay? And that's the social, economical way to control people. So all of this is a plan. All of this is tied into it, and you're very right. You got to kind of look past the figurehead sometimes, like the King of England or the guy over in Germany or whatever. You got to look past them at who is the shadow behind them and what's going on with that, because there is really truly a shadow government and is a shadow power. And That's what their handlers are. That's who's motivating them. That's who's pulling the strings, you know. And even Hitler had that going for him. Hitler may have thought he was the ultimate power, but he was probably very much mistaken in some aspects on that because he was being used too, just like everybody else is being used. And
Yeah,
these
he would
users
have.
know how to do it. Yeah.
You know, the way I see it, I mean, when you're looking at how the system works and you're seeing for how long it's been operational and who's been doing what, you know, you can realize that he would have had definitely his mission or his purpose in his life would have been to be Hitler and because he did come from a very interesting background. He was actually very creative. He was an artist.
He's very good painter.
He wanted to be an architect.
Yeah.
And then he was sort of, you know, then he pretty much was forced to go into the military. And look, he didn't, I mean, Hitler did a lot of good things. I mean, he built Germany up after the First World War. I mean, and that was why, but I do believe they were already using the Vril energy then anyway, which is why Hitler could do what he did, right, in the Second World War. He had all these great big cantankerous machines that way outsmarted everyone else's. And I do believe that was one of the reasons he was actually targeted so much, because I think a lot of the other countries were probably a little bit jealous about what Hitler was able to do.
And why he was protected so well, too, in a certain extent, too, because he was valuable.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. And, you know, there's rumors, and I'm not going to get into that today because that's another can of worms we'll open up some other time. But there are rumors that the feminist movement began that way. They said, well, now, you know, women are power and we need to tap into that. And that's how they began a lot of the feminist movement and stuff that went on back in the 60s and all that, because they said, hey, this is something we can use. We can get behind it and use, you know. That's the way they're always looking for stuff like that, Shanty. And this is the evil, true evil in this world, because they are manipulating us against our own reality of what we should be doing, you know. And when you do people that way, that's not good. That's not good.
They would, it would seem obvious to me that they would have used women, because women would generally be better because of our emotional makeup.
They have power.
Flowing.
They have a certain amount.
It's not even power. I think men and women are different, but women are able to connect more to spirit or the unseen in an easier way. It's more natural for a woman to connect with the unseen. It's much easier. For that. And, you know, so they would have used women for those abilities because...
That's what they were doing with the Vril Society, okay? They were using them for that. And when they found out that, hey, you're connected to the original Aryan race here, and they're sending us blueprints for flying saucers, we got to get on that, you know? And that's what happened with the women of the Vril. And the interesting thing about it is they supposedly took those blueprints and, by gosh, made a flying saucer with them, supposedly. And it's not that far-fetched to me that they could not have done that. But there are eyewitnesses that said, yes, they had these things. They did make these. So here's the question we got to ask ourselves, though, when it comes to the women of the Vril, Shanty. Who were they really talking to here? You know? And there's a lot of, theory that it wasn't aliens that they were hooking up with, although they were fooled by that. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it. Would it not something like maybe fallen angel type thing going on here? Misrepresenting themselves as aliens to get these women to channel what they wanted them to do, because fallen angels supposedly follow that very same formula. You know, you let us do what we want, we'll give you some stuff too. Okay, kind of a thing. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That's the way they work. And so they were given, and who did they go to? They didn't go to the United States. They didn't go to Roosevelt with this. They didn't do that. They went to Hitler. Okay. What does this sound like? This sounds very demonic in my book, along those same lines. Because why would a race way out in outer space really care about giving us flying saucer plans? You know, you got to think about this a minute and look at the big picture. What's really going on here? Were these women not really hooking up with aliens, or the original aliens, which are really, I call them the original aliens? They are fallen angels. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about it. That might be what the motivation was behind a lot of this. But I'm not going into that too big today. But that's something you got to look at. That's another card you got to play in this game here. because that could possibly be. Knowing demons the way I know demons, unfortunately, this is the way they play chess with us. Okay, they misrepresent themselves and get us to believe something of what's not really going on here, the real thing. They're very good at that. They are masters of deception. And it sounds to me like the women of the Vril were being greatly deceived in many aspects. Now, here's where it gets really weird, okay? There are rumors that these women got much deeper into the occultic situation of this. Now, the Nazis, by the way, the guys that were sitting on this, like I said, taking the notes and getting the plans and all that, were more interested in the war effort than the women of the Vril were. The women of the Vril were saying, hey, this is really knocking our consciousness wide open here. You know, we're channeling things, we're doing all this stuff. They were really excited about this, you know. And they said, we can, and here's what they channeled back, okay? These forces said, not only will we give you the plans for flying saucers and we're here to help you, we will help you become gods. We will help you become super people. We will help you obtain power that you only dream of because we have the Vril. We are the Vril, okay? And they offered it like, what does this sound like? It sounds like that fruit back in the garden again here, okay? And this is the same, what did I say earlier? Evil is predictable. It follows a pattern. It's got a manual. We need to get a hold of that manual one day, Shanty, and find out exactly what's coming up next. But anyway, they've got like a manual. They're following a formula here. You know why they follow a formula? Because, by gosh, it works. You know, evil is not going to waste his time on something that doesn't work. That's just the way it works. It goes, okay? But anyway, the women have said, boy, we got a hold of something here now. We can become gods. We can become super. We can open our consciousness up and do this, you know. This sounds very much like a suspicious way to slip demonic possession under the door, okay? That's what it sounds like. It's coming down to it. And, you know, you've seen me do shows about the voodoo and all that stuff where you allow spirits to come into you and all this stuff. None of that kind of stuff is good for you, okay? You got to be very careful what you're handling and dealing with here because they may not have your best intentions at heart. And it doesn't sound like that's what was going on with the Vril. But now here's where it gets even weirder, okay? Really gets into high strangeness. According to some, they knew this, and there were very few notes that we have that the Vril Society left behind after World War II. Because at the end of 1945, the Vril Society completely disappeared. To this day, we have no trace of it and do not know what happened to these women. But here are the rumors, legends, if you want to call it, that are connected to it. That these women hooking up with this force allowed this consciousness to come in and take over them. And it turned them into something very much like psychic vampires, supposedly. And here's where it gets real freaky now. They supposedly obtained longer life. They became what we would call vampires, but they don't live off of blood, supposedly. They lived off of, guess what? Energy. Like the real energy that we're talking about. They live off of energy. They can get energy from people, or they can even get it spiritual wise. But they live off of energy. So in order to do this, they supposedly allowed this to happen and turned them into something very much like vampires and made them immortal. And that the Vril is still out there somewhere. The Vril Society still exists, but we just don't know about it. They're in the background. They're in the shadows, very much like a lot of people claim about with the Templar Knights that Hitler was, loved so much. Hitler was fascinated with the Templars, and the Templars supposedly had a lot of unknown occultic powers because they found certain objects in the Holy Land that they venerated. That's a story we need to do, a show on nothing but the Templars someday, because that's a fascinating thing. Are they still in this world? Are they still active in the background? Just like the Rothschilds you talked about. And there is evidence that the Rothschilds, some of them were Templars. Okay. This gets weird, I know, but here's where the connections start coming in. You keep connecting, the lines are intersecting. It's weird. But anyway, according to legend, The women all disappeared, and Maria has not been seen since then. Those days, where did they go? What happened to them? Or are they waiting once again to come back and take power once more? And they're vampires like beings. They're still living and they haven't aged at all. They're still out there somewhere. This is fascinating stuff. Somebody needs to make a movie about this and make a great movie. But anyway.
But I mean, wouldn't they be these guys that kind of come back and reincarnate and shapeshift themselves into another body? And that it be, to me, it would almost be the same. If she's disappeared, especially if you say she's disappeared, where did she go? To me, it would seem that she probably took on another shape or form.
Well,
because
according to the legends, they obtained a lot of what I call, we did a show on that, the different powers of witchcraft, the dark witchcraft, They supposedly obtained all those powers. They had the ability to shapeshift. They have the ability to move invisible. They had the ability of levitation, of mind over matter, and all this other thing. They supposedly acquired all of this from the Vril, okay? And they channeled all this and supposedly got it. And this is what turned them into super beings. They're supposed to be out there somewhere, still in the background, manipulating things, still doing their job or whatever it is they do, their evil stuff. And they're supposed to be part of that along with these bloodlines. And here's the weird thing. There's another connection. That the women of the Vril, mostly like Maria, they were all connected to these old bloodlines that we talked about, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all them. And even the Collins family was another one. There are different bloodlines out there. And I've had a lot of people come to me over the years and say, doctor, I'm really worried because I'm kin to these people. I got this blood in me, am I going to, one day wake up one morning with horns or what, what's going to happen to me? And I said, well, here's something you got to keep in mind, okay? This is all spiritual, and the battle is spiritual, the war is spiritual, but the weapons are real, okay? And the weapons that they use, a lot of them are weapons of the mind, weapons of, like we talked about, economy, social, all these weapons they use, they're real. They are very effective the way they use them. But we got to remember something. No matter what our bloodline is or may be, and you may have some of that blood, I may have some of that, we don't embrace it. If you embrace it, then you authorize it. So if you don't embrace that darkness in your background, you're not got anything to worry about, because if you're worried about that, that's a good sign, by the way. That means you're not too far gone. But you don't have to embrace that darkness. You don't have to make it your own just because it happens to be your bloodlines. A lot of people get hung up on that. And I tell you, don't worry about that. You're worrying about the wrong thing. Just take care of how you're dealing with it. Make sure you're dealing with it the right way, the way that heals you, keeps you strong, keeps you high vibrational, however you want to say that. That's what you need to worry about. And you can't do nothing about anybody else's but your own. So that's what you got to worry about first. You have to work on yourself. Well, you can help other people. I'm not saying none of that, but you can help other people along, and that's what we're here for. I say that many times. What are we here for? We can't help each other. We can't be here for each other. But you got to look out for you too. You got to make sure you're standing on rock solid ground, or you can't help anybody else. That's the way that's going to go. So, don't worry about the bloodlines. Don't worry. A lot of people say, I'm RH negative. What's going on with that? Don't worry about that. Just worry about whether you have embraced that darkness or not. That's what you don't want to do. Like some of these other people have done. And like I say, they're drunk on power. They want to handle us the way they want to handle us. And that's not right when you do people that way. You were not put here to control the narrative. That's not what that's all about. But these people believe that. And they're very narcissistic in that. You know that, Shanti. I mean, they say, oh, I'm smarter than you are. I know better than you are. I'm trying to help you out here. That's not an excuse. That's never the right excuse to use either. We're all the same, depending on our environment makes us different, of course. Our environment, how we're raised, how we're born, the way we take life, the way life takes us sometimes and does things to us. We are products of that, But we must always understand the one thing we should always strive for control over is ourselves. You know, that's the main thing. Once you get that to fall in line, you're doing pretty good. You know, but that's the lesson from all this. And the lesson Hitler and none of his other people learned, none of the ladies of the Vril, they missed that message. You know, the big picture of the whole thing. They were out to control civilizations and people, the narrative of the world itself, when they should have been worrying about their own selves and where they were coming from. But what happened to the ladies of the Vril? Who knows? Maybe they still are out there somewhere waiting for the day when they can come back and do what they got to do. I
I'm
do know
sure
one.
they're around. I'm sure they're around.
They were priestesses of high strangeness, definitely. They were really channeling some heavy duty, weird stuff. But yeah, you got to wonder if the story is finished yet or not.
It's never ending. I have a question for you, though. I have a question. You know, we hear a lot, and if any, you know, if people here listen to Donald Marshall, and I mean, I've followed him on and off for quite a while. He speaks about the Vril being a lizard and different types of Vril lizards, and one in particular that goes into the eye, and that pretty much starts living in the brain and then becomes a parasite, literally a parasite that takes over the brain. And that for me is an interesting concept, because if you're looking, and it pretty much clones you, right? So it's clones you, the whole of you, your brain, everything. So then you become the consciousness that the Vril wants to channel. So that would make sense to me.
Would that not be a form of possession in a way? You
Well,
know?
yes. Yes, but what I'm saying is when we're looking at Hitler and his ability to have the oration skills that he did, right? That would make sense to me. And I'm not saying it did, I'm questioning, because if we're looking at the Vril Society and they have these supernatural abilities, I believe it 100%, you know, because I think it's probably called something different in different societies, right? The energy itself. But if you're looking at Hitler, then or what Donald Marshall is saying, that it goes in through the eye and then pretty much lives in the brain, clones the brain, becomes the parasite that now takes over the host body. And if that is the case, then it would make a lot of sense why people have such, like Hitler, have such good oration skills, because in that minute, that thing just tunes into that mode and receives that frequency of.
Well, I tend to think Hitler was the devil's own man. I mean, the devil definitely had to like him. Satan, darkness, evil, whatever name you want to give it. And I think it gave him some what I would call supernatural talents in that respect. But as for the eye worm thing, I've heard that theory that supposedly this is a sort of a form of alien or fallen angel technology that they use on people to get them under their control and get them to control other people that way as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if evil doesn't have something in its little bag of tricks like that. It wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, that is one theory that is. But like I said a moment ago, it is a form of possession if you look at it that way. And we need to do a show one day on the different levels of demonic possession in this world. And some of it is downright spooky because it can be so subtle, so very low key that you never know it's there until bam, it gets activated. And it is really freaky stuff the more you look at true demonic possession. And it's not the Hollywood type, okay? Forget about Hollywood, the head going around spitting the green juice and all that. That's Hollywood, okay? The real demonic possession, and I've seen cases of it. I've been in on exorcisms that took place. I've seen people float up off of beds, okay? I've seen them levitate. I've seen a lot of freaky stuff, okay? But it's not as full blown a lot of times. It's not as full out there in your face as people think it is, okay? Because that's not the way these powers work. They're very low key. They're very sneaky this way. They never play their hand until they absolutely have to, or they're forced to do it, okay? And that's like I said not long ago about some people who run their jobs in this world, okay? And you might run into them at McDonald's and places like that. They say, well, I'm here to do my job and I'm going to do so little of it that I have to do, until I have to do it. And that's not a good way to run a job. I'm only going to do it because I have to do it. You should be taking pride in what your work is. You should be doing, the best that you can and not just showing up and just, saying, I'm here. What else you want? Which means messenger. But anyway, there's different races of these angels. And there is one race described. Are you ready for this? And I forget their name, but they're described as fiery serpents. Does that not sound reptilian enough for you or what? Yeah, this is getting real freaky when you get into it. And this is biblical now, folks. I'm not making this stuff up. It's there. But you have different types of races of angels, and some of them, like the wheels inside the wheels with eyes, that sounds mechanical like. So there, and yes, somebody asked me the other day, is there not some type of celestial mechanics? Absolutely. I believe without a doubt there is a celestial mechanic. And but here's the thing about Hollywood. I was watching a movie the other day. I think it's one of the John Wick movies. I think it was. Anyway, they quote the Bible. And it says that, are there not angels even now in heaven with strange weapons? That is not in the Bible. I don't know where they got that. They made that one up. That's not in there. But you have to wonder about that, though. And I told somebody said that to me the other day. I said, well, don't bother to look it up because it's not in there. That's Hollywood made that up. But it would not surprise me if they are not there. They have a celestial mechanics because they gave us a little bit of the celestial mechanics. They gave us the ability, supposedly, to wage war. They gave women makeup. They did all these different things here. They have the mechanics, okay? And that doesn't surprise me. And that's where a lot of these ships that people see, a lot of these UFOs, they call them, or whatever you call them, UAPs, may be part of that because they are spiritual and not physical in our realm. That's a different story altogether. You're dealing with spiritual as opposed to physical things, but when the physical and the spiritual get together, weird things happen. And that's where, of course, you got supposedly the Nephilim from and all that. So in the end, they are definitely different races of angels. So you could say that these are aliens, okay, because they are not things of this world. They don't belong on this world. If they show up down here, they're passing through, or they're aliens. Okay, we're not aliens. You and I, Shanty, we're made of the earth. From the dust thou art, to the dust thou shalt return. We are children of this planet. We belong here. But when somebody else shows up that don't belong here, that's an alien in my book, whatever it may be. Okay, and that's the way you got to look at it. But all of this stuff. These are the mysteries that we have the clues to. And this is what makes it so fascinating. You can talk about this all that you want. And look at what I said about, we talked about earlier, the Nordics, they call them, the tall whites. If they do exist as a race, guess what? That sounds like, what's that sound like? Some angels that we've heard about. I mean, that's what they sound like. And these angels, some of them look so scary. What's the first thing they say? Don't be afraid. Don't pass out on me here. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you. They must be scary looking. Okay. They got to be very unusual looking to do that. So when you hear about these, some of them look like us. Are they intentionally looking like us, or just wearing our face so that they won't scare us if we know what they really look like? If I were an alien going somewhere else, that would be what I would do. I would show up looking like you so I wouldn't scare you or do whatever I do. That makes more sense. Yeah, it makes more sense.
And I think this is part of the deception, when we're looking at the whole Hollywood thing, that they've made us believe aliens are little green men with funny horns and what have you, But that's really to divert us, because what we don't see is that this has been an ongoing internal change for a lot of them, as you say, with these host body, with these parasites and things, that these alien entities literally taking over human bodies. And it looks the same, it acts the same, it talks the same, but suddenly it has a different
Invasion of the body snatchers thing there.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's the real alien. And that's what I think. Honestly, you know, when we're looking at, also listening to you, listening to Jerry Marzinski, when we talk about the schizophrenia and stuff like that, when we're realizing schizophrenia is actually entities, right? And it's created through trauma.
Well, that's true. There's no doubt about it, Shanty, that, you know, a lot of that, I'm not saying all of it now. You can't paint it all with a broad brush. But a lot of diseases of the mind and the body have a demonic force behind them. Totally. They take that and use it and utilize it against us. Yes. Oh, yes. That happened many times before. I think it was one instance in the Bible where Jesus cast a demon out of somebody, and they had some kind of sickness. And he told them, now go your way and sin no more. You know, don't do that anymore, because he had that, because he opened himself up spiritually to get that disease. And I think there are forces out there that use disease like that against us. Yeah, without doubt. And here's another thing. We have parasites, okay? And a vampire is a parasite if you won't look at them that way. They're living off of other people. But you've got things in this world like the screwworm. You know about screwworms, right? They, you know, cattle get it, and we can get it too, by the way. If we eat the wrong kind of cow or deer or whatever thing, we can get screwworms. And guess what they do? They go straight to your brain and start drilling holes in your brain. I don't know about you, but I don't need holes in my brain, okay? But this is real.
Like it's enough as it is. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is real. That's the proverbial hole in your head that you don't want. But anyway, this stuff is real, you know. And look, mad cow disease does the same thing. You know, it has worms that get in there, but that's another form of that. So you've got and you got to ask yourself this question: from what other realm? And I'm saying what other dimension? And I think we don't need to look interplanetary more than we need to look more interdimensional wise on these things, okay? Because from some other dimension, what would a parasite from that thing do? Maybe would it not crawl in your eye and take over your brain? It might do that, you know. So you got to wonder about this. And what if somebody knows about that? Let me tell you this: a big part of witchcraft, dark black witchcraft, and I get witches mad at me a lot because I got to start saying just dark witchcraft, because they say, oh, I'm a good witch, I'm a white witch, you know. They get mad at me. But anyway, dark witchcraft, a lot of it is ritualized to open these doorways, to open these dimensions. And God only knows what they're getting out of these dimensions when they do that. You know, they could be bringing stuff like that out of there and using them. Yeah.
Anything to do with power and control is what they're getting out of these doorways. So whatever it might be, whether it's sex, money, clout, political clout, or whatever, that's what they're getting, and that's what they're always trading for. The three will always go hand in hand.
That's the one thing about magic, black magic, white magic, whatever kind of magic you want to talk about. And we could do shows on different kinds of magic. There's a candle magic, mind magic. There's different kind of magic that they do. All of this is geared for one thing and one thing only. We got to always remember this. Magic, whatever form you want to call it, witchcraft, sorcery, whatever, is geared to changing your reality or changing reality itself. Yeah,
that's what it's even magic, Dennis. Yeah. They don't deserve the word magic. It's manipulation. They do manipulation.
If I want to be world famous and a billionaire, I change my reality. Okay,
manipulate my reality.
I get what I want. Yeah, that's what that's all about. You know, so. That's what, and you got to wonder about some of these people. We talked about that before. Some of these well-known people, maybe they signed some kind of contract. They got some kind of deal going here, you know, that they get what they want. Yeah, and here's the trade. Here's the trade-off. A lot of people ask me this, and I'm gonna say this, and we need to talk about this a moment. It's not just selling your soul, okay? You're not gonna come up to me one day and say, "Hey, Dennis, I want your soul." You know, what you gonna do with it? What are you going to do with it, right? That's not about that. It's cooperation. It's selling out. It is. It is
as an asset.
Yeah, and you're saying, use me, and I will further your narrative. I will do what you want me to do. So it's not just selling your soul. It's your buy-in on the full plan, you know? And you're saying, You're saying, take me, darkness, and use me whatever way you want to do. You may be a billionaire and I'll work for you. Okay? It's always a trade-off thing going on here. So it's not just about, you are buying somebody's soul, but it's not just about the soul. I've said this before. You can't take the human soul and put it on a weight scale. It don't weigh. That's not what, it's not a commodity. It's what you do with it that makes the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Dennis, thank you very much for another delightful week. And we are now on 1 hour, 11 minutes, and we're about to hit 11 seconds now.
All right.
So thank you so much for joining us again. And we look forward to having you back in 2 weeks' time for more underworld shenanigans going on. Dennis, is there anything you want to maybe say in closing, and where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can come over and visit me on my channel, Hunting the Shadows, talking about hunting shadows. That's what we do over there. Hunting the Shadows YouTube podcast channel and agency, because I call it agency because I also do paranormal counseling. I have people contact me from all over the world with their different demonic or supernatural paranormal problems. And you can get in contact with me through my website, which is denniswcarroll.com. But come on over to the channel and become a member and sign up, and you will see this very show on my channel too. I put the links on there for that as well. We're all part of a little network here. And so come on over and visit me there and become a member, become a shadow wolf. You can hunt the shadows with the rest of us. And my books are available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Just look up the author, Dennis W. Carroll.
Yay. Thank you. Thanks, Blue-Eyed Bandit. And just so you guys know, you're always welcome to drop the viewers' links, the guests' links and whatever. Always.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, guys, on that beautiful note, I will see you again tomorrow, and I will see you at 4 o'clock South African time, which is 3.5 hours earlier than now. And I think that's 4 o'clock is, oh man, is it 9 or I don't know, EST. I always forget. There's so many Americans and you guys are all on different time zones. So I never remember what's what anymore. But tomorrow, 4 o'clock South African time, where I'm going to be premiering the whole political situation here in South Africa, but also just talking about, really, I've done the decode, dismantle, reorganize, choose strategy on that. How does politics really work? How does the shadow government control? We talk about the two wings of the same bird. So check that out, because if it's happening here and there, that's a template they've used for everywhere. And then we can see how the players actually play and who the players are. And we can start checking that out in our own environment, because this is politics is our big enemy. Politicians are the biggest enemy, the way I see it, in terms of the nonsense, the puppeteering, and the shadow figures that actually drive and handle that machine. And then, of course, tomorrow night, I have Michelle Melendez again, great guest from 2 weeks ago. We spoke about the Great Maui land grab and what's happening there. She's a fantastic guest. So join me at 7 p.m. tomorrow, which is 20 minutes earlier than now. And then I'll see you guys again on Saturday with Jerry Marzinski. And then at 6 o'clock. And then Sunday, I will see you for members and Patreons on Zoom with the usual book club with Jessie. We're going to be talking about the Disney symbolism and stuff that she recently did on her show. And we're going to be diving deeper into that and asking questions and things. So members and Patreons, join us for that. And on that beautiful note, I will not be jabbering in your ears anymore. Have a gorgeous day. Tammy Jaros Reed is taking a bit of a break right now. I think, especially with testimonies like that, and I know somebody, I think it was you, Lisa Lee, that asked about him the other day as well. He will be back, hopefully. But, I think with guests like JR who go so deep and talk about such bone-curdling information, they definitely need a bit of a timeout as well. So he's just taking some time out for now. But I will let you guys know when he's back. Take it easy, everybody. God bless you all. Bye, Dennis.
Goodbye.
If this broke something open, if you recognized yourself in the testimony, if your body responded before your mind understood, the next step isn't more information. It's pattern work. Decode what your nervous system built to survive. Dismantle the story that keeps it running. Reorganize through the body and choose from the person you're becoming, not from the pattern that formed when you were too small to choose. That's Solutions. Link below. The body is the record. Let's listen.